Good morning. We've made it to the last day of Dreamforce. Can you imagine? Pretty good stuff. I'm James Dolph. I'm here to talk about scaling security at your company. So, some of the things that we're going to talk about today are things that Salesforce has done. Some of the things are resources that we've made available to you. I'm going to try to keep it really simple. We probably won't have too much time for questions, so afterwards I'm going to head over to the security booth, so you can follow me over there if you have follow-up from this, but let's get going. So I'm sure you have this memorized by now, because we show this at every presentation. The gist of this is make investments in Salesforce based on what we have right now, and not things that we talk about in this talk. I don't think I'm going to talk about anything that's going to sway you either way, but if you're thinking that way, make sure that you're looking at what we've got right now. So we do this a little bit backwards sometimes. We start out with a thank you. I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank you all for taking an interest in security, because this is a topic that's near and dear to me and near and dear to Salesforce. And if you're part of our ISV ecosystem, thank you for being part of our secure ISV ecosystem. So let's get started into the content. So why is security important? There have been a lot of high-profile events in the news, to say the least. There are a lot of new and existing regulations, GDPR being an example that's hitting a lot of us. So security's got a very, very high profile. And you may be a small company that doesn't know where to get started. You may be a big company that has some security capabilities, and you're finding it hard to kind of keep up with the growth of your company. Salesforce, we're growing very quickly, so we feel this pain as well too. And there have been some things that we've done over the years that have helped us to make sure that we can meet those security goals without too much stress to the organization. So how do we scale security? I think the first thing is I'm just going to go through a little bit of the touch points that we look at Salesforce for development. So this is a very simplified version of a software development lifecycle, and we use this when we talk to customers about what we do internally. But you should think about, there's going to be some design phase. This is going to be an ideation phase where you're thinking about what are we going to build? What are the goals around what's being built? This is a really great time to get some security requirements into the mix. Then secure coding. When you're building things, you should, from your secure design, come up with a definition of done, a set of tasks that are required before you're actually calling a feature done. And then you need a way to verify that. So you get into a testing phase. And some of this can be automated, and I'll talk about some of the tools that we make available to people inside of our ISV community and to our developer community as a whole, so that you can verify that you've met those requirements and goals that you have as a company. And then when you get towards release, you may want to look at the whole thing and figure out, does this look like what we want to release? Does this meet the bar that our customers have for security? And what we think this results in is this middle circle, which is secure done features. So think of these as the different touch points where you can interact in security. But I'm going to talk about three things. So first of all, making security everybody's job. The best way to scale security is to make it not just a security team's job or not just a product manager's job. Make it part of what everybody does every day. The next thing is deploy specialists and champions when you need a little bit of extra help. And then the third thing is automate to scale. Don't do tedious things that computers do really, really well. And each one of these, I'll point you to some resources that we've either used internally, released to you in the public, or things that we think have worked really well within Salesforce. So making security everybody's job. Security doesn't scale very well. It's a very human-intensive task. And we all know that people don't scale very well. So you have to either spread things out or you have to find ways to make them easier. And the result of security being, somebody else's job is that it doesn't get done. So we want to make sure that everybody feels like security is their job, because if it's somebody else's job, it doesn't get done, or it becomes one of these nice-to-have things. So the first thing you need to do is define some goals and conventions. So developers want to do the right thing. I think everybody wants to do the right thing. Everybody has goals around security. So the first thing you need to do is define some goals and conventions. And a good example of a convention is we want to make sure that the access control settings that org admins set in their org are enforced with all the products that Salesforce builds. So from what we actually need to do for that standpoint, we want to enforce CRUD, FLS, and sharing. So this isn't prevent a specific vulnerability like cross-site scripting. These are sort of high-level goals. These are principles that you want to enforce across your development. You may have other requirements around regulations. You may have some user experience requirements around security. A really good one I would suggest to everybody is build things secure by default so that you have to do something to use insecure behavior. So these are sort of good examples of conventions. Another one is documentation. People want to know what their obligations are. If you don't tell developers what they need to do to secure your products, they're not going to do it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the training slide. There's some nice resources if you don't have anything in place, or if you do have some kind of rudimentary documentation, some places that you can enhance that a little bit. And then finally, threat modeling. So who in this room has heard of threat modeling? All right, so we got a couple people that have heard of threat modeling. So everybody else, you're going to get the benefit of this. Threat modeling is the single most important thing that you can do in the design phase to make sure that you're meeting your security goals. And threat modeling basically comes up with a shared understanding between your developers and your security team and other stakeholders as to what are the threats, what are the things that you're trying to prevent, what are the protections that you have in place, and what are you trying to protect your customers from, and what are you trying to do to protect your data. And the important part of threat modeling is this spans the whole life cycle of features and products that you build. So we know inevitably the features that you're going to build now are going to have changes made to them. So if you have a threat model and you can say, if we make this type of change, we're going to have to put some other protection in place in order to prevent data loss or compliance failure or something like that. So this is a really great asset to have inside of your organization. And this book by Adam Shostak is one of the best books out there to talk about how you do this in practice. So it talks about how you actually do threat modeling. And there's a ton of tools and some commercial tools that help you do this, but highly recommended. I don't get any sort of kickback from Amazon on this. This is just a good book. The next thing is make it part of your definition of done. So if you are an agile shop, you probably have a definition of done for your features. And that may include things like performance. It may include accessibility. Probably includes a whole lot of doneness criteria around functionality. Just like all those things, it's really important to make security part of your definition of done. At Salesforce, we've made security part of our definition of done, and that's defined in each of our development teams. So developers know that in order to call something complete, they have to meet the criteria that's defined in that definition of done. And a way that you can make this fun is using something that some places call evil user stories and some places call abuse cases. And basically, these are like anti-user stories. They're like the Bizarro to Superman of user stories. And then a good example of one would be, as an attacker, I would like to bypass the authentication of the application to access somebody else's data. And then you can add those to your sprints, and you can work against those. So you can make sure that you have something in place to prevent that. So it's a kind of a way to make it fun, and it's a good way to let developers think evil a little bit about the stuff that they're building, which is also kind of fun in itself, Training. Training is super, super important. Like I said, developers want to do the right thing. And there's some challenges sometimes when you're a small organization to come up with training. The good news is we've built a lot of the stuff that if you're an Apex developer or a Visualforce or Lightning developer, we've got a lot of resources that are available to you to sort of bootstrap this. So if you look at the Security Dev Center, I've got a little picture of it here on the slide. There's a ton of resources on here, including secure coding guidelines, which is, if you're familiar with OWASP, it's documentation that explains what an issue is, how to prevent it, and what the impact is. We've also got a secure development trailhead that we've been demoing over at our booth. And this trailhead is 12 hours of training. It's interactive training. You can actually break and fix things. So this is a great way to provide training to all your developers on an ongoing basis. Or on their onboarding. So you can either make it part of development plans, or you can make it a requirement for developers in order to start coding. And if you're not building stuff on our platform, really cool organization called SafeCode. And SafeCode is supported by a bunch of big organizations like Adobe and Microsoft and a bunch of other places that you've heard of. And they contribute training, documentation, and a lot of other really great resources. So if you have nothing, or if you're starting from like, here's my security policy, which is one page, and you want to put some meat on that, and you want to say, how do we train people on cross-site scripting? How do we train people on CSRF or other vulnerabilities? There's a lot of really great stuff in there. So check out SafeCode. Really, really great stuff and all free. So up till now, I've talked about how do we make developers aware of what they need to do? How do we put the structures in place to enforce that? Sometimes you need to call in the specialists. I run our product security team here at Salesforce, so I can say there are a few things that you can do, and it really depends on the size of your organization as to what you deploy. We've deployed two different things, and both of these, they have different advantages, and they work for different sizes of organizations. So if you're a big enough company, or you're a company that has, maybe you're highly regulated, or maybe you have some, very interesting and challenging technology that you're trying to secure, you can actually roll out a product security team. And think of these folks as sort of like security consultants for the inside of your company, and folks that help you to meet those requirements that you set up front, that you've defined up front. So some other advantages of product security teams, like a lot of these folks can do research, because a lot of you are pushing the boundaries of technology, and there's probably not documentation for every single thing that you want to do and how to do it securely. So they can research, they can build tools, you can look at them as advisors, and a real simple way to get started is just to set up some office hours if you get a product security team, because that's a good way to get face-to-face time, so they're not the boogeyman, they're not scary. Another way, and this is one way that we've really been able to scale security across the organization, is security champions. And this is something that an organization of any size can do, and it's something that grows with your organization. So security champions, you generally have one per team or feature group, depending on how you're organized. They spend 10 to 20% of their time maximum on security tasks. So this would be helping to make sure the definition of done is met, automation, which we'll talk about a little bit later. They're embedded with the team, so they're sort of a trusted part of the team. And you can build a community around this too. So these folks get specialized training, and they get skills that are really valuable in the market. But you can also do things like we do. We do something, an example of what we've done is we did like a hacker movie night. So has anybody seen the movie Hackers? It's like a really cheesy movie. We did a hackers movie night, and we did it really, really cheesy too. We had sort of like themed snacks, and we did it at all of our locations. And this is a way that you can build community around this and encourage people to want to participate in this program. So they get additional, additional advantages out of being a security champion, besides helping you to secure the products that you're building. So automating to scale. Let the machines do the work. A long, long time ago, around the time when I started at Salesforce, which was at the end of this month, it's going to be 8 years, we did a presentation internally to the company called Robots Do My Job. And if you're familiar with Futurama, it was, we had Bender in every slide. And the gist of the presentation was there's a lot of tedious work that we do in security, that some of it's sort of akin to QA, and some of it is just really manual and hands-on that we should be automating. And that was when we really started focusing really heavily on automation within the company. So since then, we've deployed a bunch of commercial tools, we've built a bunch of internal tools, and we've come up with some things that we think are really helpful for organizations of any size, and we've released some of them to the public. And so I'll talk about those next here. So these are 3 tools that we've made available to the community, things that you can use, and some of them that you can actually purchase as well too through these vendors. So the first one is called Providence. Providence is a check-in time analysis tool. And what that means is that when a developer checks in a piece of code, it runs some very simple kind of anti-pattern type rules on it, and it gets back to the developer really quickly, either through an email or through a ticketing system. It's got a lot of ability to integrate with what you do internally. And the advantage of Providence is that it closes this loop. It makes it really quick between when something is introduced and when something is logged. And this results in developer productivity, because developers oftentimes forget what they've built if you're sending them bugs from months and months ago. And so there's a certain amount of ramp up that has to happen in order for them to be able to fix the bugs. So it increases developer productivity, and it really quickly finds bugs. The next one that's slower and a little bit more thorough is check marks. And we've built a portal that all of our customers can use to a limited extent to be able to submit your Apex and Visualforce code and get back some results. So check out this link on here. It's really cool. If you're a partner, you have a slightly higher limit. If you are a customer, you have a set limit, but it's a really great tool. If you find that this is valuable to you, you can actually bring checkmarks in-house and develop it into your pipelines. So if you're a CI/CD shop, you can build it directly into your pipelines and get feedback really quickly, or use it as a way to gate releases and enforce that doneness criteria. The last one is something that we've been working on that's a little bit experimental. It's called Providence. Providence is an open source static analysis tool, and it's not quite as good as checkmarks. You know, the engine doesn't have as many capabilities, but it does some really nice stuff. And we've given them some rules for platform technologies around Salesforce. So definitely check this out. You know, we intend in the future to put a little bit of effort into this and try to make it, you know, another option for folks. So you've got some commercial options, you've got some free options, you've got some open source created by Salesforce, and these type of things help you to really scale security. Because, like I mentioned, a lot of the low-hanging fruit in security is just very tedious stuff. You know, it's stuff that you don't want to wish that on your developers. You don't want to wish that on your security team. Let's let the robots do that work. So, closing thoughts. Security is hard. We all know security is hard. Security doesn't scale very well. There's also no finish line in security. It's one of these things that you're gonna continuously need to make improvements in the way that you attack security, right? So there are some things that you can do. You know, making security part of everybody's job is the first one. You know, make sure that everybody knows that security is part of your value proposition. It's part of your definition of done, and let people know what they need to do. Then, you know, bring in resources that are specialized to security if you need. You know, if you're growing really quickly, start getting that infrastructure in place, because it's going to help you in the future when you really need it. Or if you're an ISV and you have enterprise customers that really need super secure offerings, it'll help you to have a story around that. What do you do? You know, you can take that simplified software development lifecycle, and you can say, we did all of these things in these circles, and we think that this makes us secure enough for you to use in your enterprise. And then finally, don't do all the tedious work. You know, automate what you can. There's a lot of other really great open source software out there for security that's not around the Salesforce ecosystem. You know, it's really important to just try to find ways to make it quick, try to find ways to make it easy, and try to find ways to not make your developers do a lot of tedious work. So I'm actually done with about a minute to spare. So are there any questions that I can answer for the group? And if not, I'll be over at the booth. You can just, you know, come and grab me there as well too. Which one? The 3 products? Yes. The automation ones? Yeah. So at a basic level, all 3 are free. The middle one, there's some limits on it. So you couldn't, say, deploy check marks in your build pipeline, because you wouldn't have enough lines of code. But you could buy check marks and do that. Providence, it's free. We've open sourced some Apex and Visualforce rules for it, so you'll be able to find some basic stuff, and we're going to continue to work on the Lightning and some other things that we'll put out with that. And then PMD is also free, but PMD is a little more on the experimental side. So, yeah. Yeah. So the best one. So the question was, what are the capabilities? Which are the best? Checkmarks is the most thorough. It's got the most capabilities, and when you buy the commercial version of it, it's got the most ability to integrate into different tools like Jenkins and you know, Travis and other types of continuous integration systems. Providence is great. It's not quite as thorough as something like checkmarks because it doesn't do full static analysis. It does more kind of, think of it as like super grepping and maybe a little bit more than that. And then PMD is very limited static analysis. So it doesn't do everything that checkmarks does. So if you're looking for like a one-size-fits-all solution, there's advantages to all of those. So think about defense in depth. Think about where those would apply inside of the life cycle. So I'm over time by 10 seconds. So if you have any more questions, I'm going to walk over to the security booth right after this, and you can check out the trails and everything else. So thank you very much.